Between 1958 and 1976, Britain and Iceland were at war. Or rather, they were engaged in an undeclared militarised interstate conflict. That's when a dispute is quite serious, but doesn't actually meet the criteria of full-scale war. It is very likely that you have never even heard of such disputes, but they could have had very grave consequences on geopolitical stability had anything gone amiss. This is Iceland and the Cod Wars. When you hear about Iceland, it is mostly descriptions of the beautiful auroras or the Blue Lagoon or even the icebergs of Jökulsárlón. If that is what you've clicked for, I'm sorry. Now, this is the first episode in this series, so I may need to clarify a thing or two. In each episode, I want to focus on a specific country and explore a story many have not heard about. In doing so, we will often steer away from the postcard view of that country. If you have any constructive feedback about how I can make these episodes more enjoyable in the future, please tell me in the comments down below. Iceland is an insular republic in the Northern Atlantic with a population of 365,000 people spread across 103,000 square kilometres. The country is renowned for its high volcanic activity and its natural wonders. Although not an EU member, it has been part of NATO since 1949, but more on that later. To understand the Cod Wars, we need to go back in time. The waters around Iceland have always boasted a high concentration of fish, especially cod. In the 14th century, British ships were already going fishing around Iceland even though the island belonged to Denmark. The Danish king Eric of Poromania even complained to Henry V that British fishermen were overfishing and that it was having an impact on the people of Iceland. Indeed, the entire island lived off fishing, so these people were very vulnerable to any fluctuations in this aquatic resource. Even though restrictions were passed by Parliament, no one actually bothered to enforce them. Denmark was not happy about that, and the skirmishes continued for hundreds of years. In the 19th century, with the arrival of steam-powered ships, these fishing excursions by Britain were multiplied. Deals were reached and broken by both countries multiple times. In 1901, the two parties finally agreed upon a 6-kilometre area around Iceland reserved for the Icelanders. It became known as the Anglo-Danish Territorial Waters Agreement and was meant to last for 50 years. Fast forward to 1944 and Iceland voted its independence from Denmark and was formally established as a new republic on the 17th of June. Iceland wanted to revoke the agreement to extend its territorial waters, of a mere 1 kilometre at first, and announced it planned to do so in 1952. In response, the British trawling industry banned Iceland from exporting its catch to the UK, which proved a very hard blow to the Northern Ireland's economy. The UK was its biggest customer, and fishing was and remains the island's biggest source of revenue. 6 years later, the wars began. Midnight, 1st of September 1958. A new law has just tripled Iceland's territorial waters. In response, the Royal Navy escorted British trawlers to keep fishing in these waters. Shots were fired by Icelandic Coast Guard ships when British trawlers refused to turn back, and even the Icelandic ship Aegir tried to ram into a British trawler but was cut short by HMS Russell. When the First Cod War ended in 1961, Iceland had secured 22 kilometres of territorial waters. But had the Royal Navy been defeated? Midnight, 1st of September 1972. Iceland has expanded its territorial waters 93 kilometres. Wow. Icelandic Coast Guard ships set out to cut the nets of British trawlers. The Royal Navy sailed in and warning shots were fired. The first and only casualty of the Cod Wars occurred on the 29th of August 1973, when the Aegir Coast Guard ship attempted to ram into the British frigate Apollo. An Icelandic engineer tragically lost his life. The Second Cod War ended in November 1973, and Iceland was allowed to preserve its 93 kilometres. Remember when Iceland started an undeclared war for a few kilometres of exclusive fishing zone back in 1958? Well, by 1975, they were bargaining for a full 370 kilometres. Sorry to repeat myself, but enter the Royal Navy and they begin ramming Icelandic ships. You know the end. In 1976, Iceland gets to keep the 370 kilometres. Of course, concessions were made. The British were allowed temporary access to these very valuable waters. The Fishery Limits Act of 1978 in turn allowed Britain a 370 kilometre exclusive fishing zone. In 1982, the UN Law of the Sea assured states these 370 kilometres of the EEZ, the Exclusive Economic Zone, further legitimising these claims. Even so, thousands of jobs were lost in northern UK cities like Hull, leading to an entire sector collapsing and rapid decline of these areas. On a more amusing note, fish and chip shops faced with less cod were forced to diversify their offer, introducing sausages. But the important part is, how did such a small island beat back the Royal Navy 3 times? In the Third Cod War alone, Britain deployed 22 frigates against Iceland's 6 ships. And yet, we said Iceland won every time. Don't forget, all of this happened during the Cold War. Iceland is situated in the middle of the Gjögr Gap, a strategic gap between Greenland, Iceland and the United Kingdom. In 1949, when Iceland, somewhat reluctantly, joined NATO, Bjarni Benediktsson, the foreign minister, correctly said that Iceland is, under certain circumstances, of vital importance for the safety of the North Atlantic area. Indeed, the Gjögr Gap was the USSR's only access to the North Atlantic. Had war occurred, Soviet submarines would have poured out of the gap to attack US convoys or even East Coast cities. Of course, this gap was strongly fortified by the West. Yet, had Iceland sided with the USSR, the Soviets would have set up a naval base, as did the Americans, in the direct vicinity of Scottish borders. Every time the Royal Navy escorted British trawlers deep inside Icelandic waters, the island threatened to leave NATO. As we have just seen, this could have had dire consequences on regional and global stability. Every time, Uncle Sam made it clear that Britain should negotiate with Iceland before it was too late. The Cod War, more than an amusing anecdote, is a deep-rooted dispute that could have changed the world as we know it. This fish-related border skirmish is, however, not at all unique in history. We can even cite, at the time of writing, the dispute between France and post-Brexit Britain about the Isle of Jersey. Whilst researching this video, I came across a lobster war between France and Brazil. I won't be making a video about that just yet. I risk a seafood conflict overdose. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do keep an eye out for the next episodes coming out soon. Keep on exploring. Goodbye.